The stagecoach rolled in under the dying sun, wheels crunching over dust and gravel. The horses snorted, sweating under the weight of the long journey, their flanks streaked with salt and dirt. Men from the saloon paused mid-drink, women shaded their eyes, and the whole small town of Red Creek turned to look as the coach door creaked open. A hush spread when a woman appeared, frail, pale, and sitting in a wheelchair. Her gloved hands trembled as she adjusted her hat. The letter she'd held onto all the way from Kansas fluttered in her lap, bearing the words, "To my future wife, from Jed Carver, Red Creek Ranch." She swallowed hard. "So this is it," she whispered, eyes glancing over the onlookers, their pity and surprise burning hotter than the sun. The driver helped her down the ramp, her small trunk beside her. "You sure this is the place, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "Yes," she replied softly. "He's expecting me." But when she turned, the man standing near the hitching post wasn't smiling. Jed Carver was tall, broad-shouldered, a shadow of a man carved by wind and sorrow. His jaw was hard, eyes darker than a storm. He wore no hat, no smile, just disbelief. "You're my mail-order bride," he said, his voice low, rough, uncertain. She tried to meet his gaze, her heart racing. "Yes, my name's Clara Dawson. You wrote me." Jed's gaze dropped to the wheelchair, then back up. He didn't say a word. A few men snickered behind him. "Guess old Jed got himself a sitting wife," one muttered. The words stabbed her deeper than she thought possible. Jed's face hardened. He turned sharply, barking, "Shut it, all of you." The laughter died instantly. Then he looked at her again, expression unreadable. "Let's get you out of the sun." Clara's hands trembled as he took the handles of her chair. His touch was firm, steady, but she could feel the tension in his every movement. The crowd watched in silence as the rancher pushed his bride through town, one man leading the crippled woman toward an uncertain home. The ranch lay beyond the red hills, quiet and lonely. A windmill creaked in the evening breeze. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the porch, 2 boys, maybe 10 and 12. They stopped when they saw her. "Ha, is that her?" the younger one asked. Jed's throat worked before he spoke. "That's her, Sam. This is Miss Clara. She's your new mama." Clara forced a smile. "Hello, boys." They stared. One gave a stiff nod, the other looked away. She tried not to let her heart break. Inside, the cabin smelled of wood smoke and old memories. A woman's shawl hung by the door. Jed's late wife's, she guessed. Everything in the room spoke of someone gone but never forgotten. Jed lifted her gently from the chair and set her onto a cushioned seat by the fire. His hands were strong, careful, surprisingly gentle. "Didn't know you were." He stopped himself, voice tight. "Broken," she finished for him, bitterness slipping through her soft tone. He froze. "I wasn't gonna say that. But you thought it," she whispered. He looked away, jaw flexing. "You should have told me." She looked down at her lap, where her useless legs rested like weights chained to her past. "Would you have ridden back if I did?" Silence. The fire popped between them. He didn't answer. That night, Clara cried quietly as wind howled outside the ranch walls. She'd come to be a wife, a mother, to belong somewhere. But the look in Jed's eyes had told her the truth. He hadn't wanted her like this. She stared at the letter under her pillow, the one he'd written weeks ago. "I ain't good with fancy words," it said, "but my boys need a mother. I need a home that feels alive again." Alive. She wondered if he still meant it. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bread. Clara wheeled herself into the kitchen, finding Jed already there, shirt half buttoned, sunlight cutting across his scarred face. He looked up, surprised. "You cooked. I can still use my hands, Mr. Carver," she said with a faint smile. "Unless you'd rather I didn't touch your stove." He rubbed his neck, uneasy. "Didn't say that, just wasn't expecting it." The boys wandered in, drawn by the smell. They hesitated, then sat. "Eat," Clara said softly. "You've got long days ahead, I reckon." Jed watched as his sons obeyed without complaint. He couldn't remember the last time they'd eaten quietly. Maybe never since their ma died. After breakfast, Jed stood. "I'll be out at the south fence. Cattle broke through last night." She nodded. "Take care." He paused. "You'll be all right alone." She gave a small laugh. "Mr. Carver, I've been alone for most of my life. I'll manage." By noon, a thunderstorm rolled in fast and mean. Jed rode hard across the ranch, fixing posts and wrangling cattle, rain soaking through his shirt. He thought about her words, her calm, her strength despite that chair. When he returned, drenched and tired, he found the boys gathered around her in the parlor. She was reading to them, voice soft but full of life. The fire glowed, their eyes shone, and Jed stopped. For the first time in years, his home didn't sound empty. He stepped quietly inside. Clara looked up, her eyes meeting his. "You're soaked," she said. "Sit down before you catch cold." He hesitated, then did as told. She handed him a towel, and he noticed her hands, delicate but roughened by travel and effort. "You read good," he said awkwardly. She smiled faintly. "I used to be a teacher, before." She looked down at her lap again. "Before what?" "The fire," she said quietly. "It took my schoolhouse, and my legs." Jed's breath caught. "Damn," she nodded. "I lost everything, so I answered your letter." Something in his chest twisted. He'd thought she came out of pity or desperation. Now he saw something else, a will tougher than most men he knew. Days turned to weeks. Clara learned the rhythms of ranch life, feeding chickens, mending clothes, keeping the house in order. She even found ways to help with ranch books, her mind sharp and organized. The boys began to laugh around her. Jed began to linger near the porch, just to hear her talk. One evening, as the sky bled red over the horizon, Clara sat outside watching the sunset. Jed came up behind her, quiet as always. "Never thought I'd see this place look peaceful again," he said softly. "Maybe it just needed someone to remind it how," she replied. He chuckled under his breath. "You've got a way with words, Clara." She turned to him, her eyes shimmering into twilight. "And you've got a way of not saying them." He looked at her, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Fair enough." For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, filled with something unspoken but alive. Then a crash broke it. From the barn, Jed bolted upright. "Stay here." Clara's heart pounded as she watched him run. Moments later, the younger boy screamed. "Ha! The roof's coming down." Without thinking, Clara wheeled forward, faster than she thought possible. Rain had loosened the barn roof during the storm, and now the wind threatened to rip it off. Jed struggled to pull the boy free, but a beam blocked his way. "Jed," Clara shouted, "pull him toward you." He grunted, straining. The boy was stuck. The beam was too heavy. Clara looked around and saw a rope nearby. She grabbed it, tied it to the wagon post, and rolled closer. "Use this." Jed caught it, wrapping it around the beam. "Hold tight," he shouted. She braced herself, gripping the wheels, feeling her arms burn as he pulled with all his might. The beam shifted, then finally snapped free. The boy tumbled into Jed's arms. Jed turned, panting. "You saved him." Clara smiled weakly. "Couldn't let your family break again." He stared at her, soaked and shaking, her hair plastered to her face, but her eyes fierce, alive. Something in him broke open. He stepped forward, knelt before her, his hand trembling as it reached for hers. "I was a damn fool," he said hoarsely. "Thought you needed my pity. Truth is, I needed your strength." Tears welled in her eyes. "Jed," he cut her off gently, pressing his forehead against hers. "You ain't broken, Clara. You're the strongest woman I've ever known." The boys watched from the doorway, eyes wide as their father, once a man of stone, held the woman who'd brought life back to their home. Weeks later, the townsfolk saw something that made them stop and stare again. Down the main street rolled a wagon, freshly painted, driven by Jed Carver himself. Beside him sat Clara, smiling in her chair, but the chair was no longer her prison. It was built into the wagon, crafted by Jed's own hands, fitted with sturdy wheels and soft leather. She could move it on and off with a ramp he made himself. As they passed the saloon, the same man who'd laughed before tipped his hat, shame burning his cheeks. Jed didn't even glance his way. He just looked at Clara. "You ready to head home, Mrs. Carver?" he asked. She smiled, eyes glimmering. "I've been home since the day I got here." The wagon rolled on toward the horizon, dust rising behind them like a memory fading into gold. And for the first time since his wife's death, Jed Carver felt something fierce and new in his chest, hope. He'd sent for a wife out of duty, but what he got was a miracle in a wheelchair, and a love that didn't need legs to stand tall.